Rose Wilson, 28 years old, quietly cleans the windows of the library in the Mitchell estate. Her movements are gentle, almost reverent, as she watches the boy in the wheelchair. Luke, 8 years old, sits alone among stacks of books, staring into nothing with empty eyes. Rose can't resist. She starts humming softly an Italian lullaby her grandmother taught her as a child. Ninna Nana. Ninna O. Her sweet voice echoes gently through the library. Luke lifts his head for the first time. His eyes, lifeless for 2 years, begin to shine. He watches Rose as if he's seeing an angel. His lips move, trying to follow the melody. Rose notices and approaches slowly, continuing to hum. Luke watches her intently, and then, like a miracle, he whispers with a fragile but clear voice, "Rose, my teacher." The young woman almost drops her cloth. Tears spring to her eyes. "Hello, sweetheart," she responds in Italian, kneeling beside the wheelchair. Quick footsteps echo through the hallway. Paul Mitchell, 38 years old, stops at the library door and freezes. His son, who hadn't spoken a word in 2 years, is talking in Italian with the housekeeper. "Keep singing," Paul whispers, his voice thick with emotion. Margaret Stevens appears behind Paul, her face twisted with rage and panic. She watches the scene with horror, realizing her position of power is threatened. "What's going on here?" Margaret asks sharply. Paul doesn't take his eyes off his son. She made my son speak." Rose stands up nervously, sensing the tension. Luke extends his hand toward her, murmuring again, "Rose." His eyes shine with a clarity he hadn't shown in 2 years. Paul approaches, still in shock. "Who are you, and how did you get my son to talk?" Margaret Stevens, 50 years old, bursts into the library with the fury of a wounded animal. Her small, calculating eyes gleam with rage as she watches Rose still kneeling beside Luke. "Those are cheap tricks," Margaret shouts, pointing an accusing finger at Rose. "Mr. Mitchell, this woman is using manipulation techniques on the boy." Rose stands slowly, her cheeks burning with shame. "I was just singing, Ma'am." "Udil singing in Italian?" Margaret laughs cruelly. "How convenient. Where would a simple housekeeper learn the language of the doctors who treated Luke?" She turns to Paul, her voice gaining a venomous tone. "Sir, this is Rose Wilson. She lives in a tiny apartment in Queens and supports an invalid mother." Paul observes Rose with renewed interest, but Margaret continues her relentless attack. "I'm sure she researched Luke online, memorized some Italian words to impress you." Margaret circles Rose like a vulture. These women are all the same. They see a rich, widowed man and start their dirty games. Rose lowers her head, swallowing the humiliation. She needs this job. Her mother depends on the money for expensive medications. "Margaret," Paul intervenes gently but firmly, "she made my son speak for the first time in 2 years." "A coincidence," Margaret stamps her foot. "Luke was probably going to talk today anyway. I've been taking care of him for 15 years. I know every bit of his progress." The mansion staff crowds at the door, whispering and watching the spectacle. Rose feels the glances of pity and curiosity burning her skin. Luke watches everything from his chair, his eyes going from Rose to Margaret. For the first time in 2 years, he shows real emotion, frowning as he senses the cruelty in the housekeeper's voice. "Get back to your work, Rose," Margaret orders with contempt. "And don't you dare approach the boy again without my express permission." Rose makes a silent bow and leaves the library, but Margaret whispers venomously in her ear, "If you keep up these tricks, you'll regret it big time, sweetheart." Paul Mitchell paces nervously through his office, phone in hand. On the other end of the line, a private detective takes notes on his instructions. "I want to know everything about Rose Wilson. Where she lived, where she worked, why she speaks Italian. And especially Paul hesitates. Also investigate the medical treatments Luke's received since the accident. Something doesn't add up. Meanwhile, in the mansion's kitchen, Rose watches Margaret prepare Luke's evening medications. The housekeeper handles several bottles with suspicious familiarity, mixing liquids with calculated precision. "How long have you been handling the boy's medications?" Rose asks innocently, while organizing dishes. "Since the accident that left him like this," Margaret responds defensively. "When Luke stopped talking, I completely took over his medical care. The doctors trust me." In flashback, we see 2 years ago, Luke suffered a car accident where he lost his mother. Traumatized, he stopped speaking. Margaret saw the perfect opportunity. She began altering medical prescriptions, increasing doses of anti-anxiety and sedative medications to keep the boy dependent and listless. Dr. Harrison, Luke's neurologist, had recommended gradual reduction of medications and music therapy 6 months ago. Margaret intercepted the report, lying to Paul that the doctor said Luke was getting worse. Rose notices that Luke always becomes drowsy and confused after taking his medications. But this morning before the medicines, the boy was alert and responsive when she sang to him. "How many medications does he take per day?" Rose asks, feigning innocent curiosity. "5 different ones. Anti-anxiety, antidepressants, mood stabilizers," Margaret responds quickly, hiding the bottles. "Complex stuff that a simple person wouldn't understand," Rose observes discreetly. "Many bottles have very high dosages for a child." Her maternal instinct awakens a terrible suspicion. That afternoon, when Margaret leaves for the pharmacy, Rose sits again with Luke in the library. The boy is visibly more alert between doses. "How do you feel today, sweetheart?" she asks softly in Italian. "Better without medicine," Luke responds clearly, surprising himself. Rose freezes. An 8-year-old wouldn't say that unless he knew the medications were hurting him. What medicines was Margaret really giving him? Rose whispers to herself, a terrifying suspicion taking shape. Rome, 5 years ago. Rose Wilson, then 23, walks confidently through the corridors of St. Joseph Institute, one of Europe's most respected schools for special children. She carries a leather briefcase and radiates the authority of a specialized teacher. "Dr. Wilson," a colleague greets her. "How's Marco today?" "Extraordinary." Rose smiles radiantly. "He can already form complex sentences in 3 languages. Marco Williams, 8 years old, severely autistic, was her greatest challenge and pride. Rose developed a revolutionary method using multilingual music to break neurological barriers. In 1 year, Marco evolved from nonverbal to a brilliant and communicative boy. Rose was descended from Italians, raised bilingual by her grandmother. Her passion for languages led her to study in Europe, where she specialized in child neurological development. On that terrible day, Marco was anxious. A storm was approaching, and he always got agitated with weather changes. During recess, a cat got lost in the school's wet courtyard. Marco, obsessed with saving animals, escaped supervision. Rose ran after him through Rome's slippery streets. "Marco, stop, please!" she shouted desperately. The boy ran blindly toward a busy avenue, chasing the terrified cat. Rose almost reached him. Her fingers brushed his backpack when Marco stepped into the street without looking. The truck couldn't brake on the wet pavement. The accident wasn't Rose's fault, but she was devastated. Italian media sensationalized. Experimental method questioned after tragedy. Families withdrew children. Colleagues avoided her. Her brilliant career crumbled. Rose returned to America traumatized and financially broken. Working as a housekeeper was her self-imposed penance, a way to punish herself by hiding her talents. In the present, at the Mitchell mansion, Rose watches Luke sleeping heavily after Margaret's medications. She whispers in Italian, "I failed with Marco. I can't fail with you too, little angel." but there's something familiar about Luke. When he's alert, he shows the same sensitivity and intelligence that Marco had. Rose realizes she can discreetly apply her techniques, using Italian songs as a bridge. In the drawer of her simple dresser, hidden under humble clothes, are diplomas that could save Luke: specialization in multilingual therapy, certification in neurological development, knowledge that could revolutionize his recovery, but which she keeps buried out of guilt and shame. "Maybe," she murmurs, gently touching Luke's sleeping forehead. "You're my second chance to do good." The Mitchell mansion buzzes with elegant activity. Paul organized a dinner for 20 couples from New York's elite, potential investors in his new philanthropic project. Crystals shine under expensive chandeliers, and the aroma of gourmet food perfumes the refined air. Rose works discreetly, serving champagne and organizing details. Margaret watches her like a predator, planning her destruction. During the cleaning of the guest bathrooms, socialite Victoria Martinez, completely drunk, removes her diamond ring to wash her hands and forgets it on the marble sink. Rose finds the valuable jewelry and immediately goes down to return it. "Mrs. Stevens, Mrs. Martinez forgot this in the bathroom," Rose says honestly, extending the ring. Margaret smiles like a snake. "How responsible of you." "Leave it with me, I'll return it personally." 20 minutes later, while guests savor the main course, Margaret silently goes up to the staff room. She plants the ring in Rose's underwear drawer among her most personal items. "Ladies and gentlemen," Margaret announces theatrically upon returning, interrupting conversations about expensive wines, "I'm sorry to say we've discovered a thief in our house." The guests look at each other, scandalized. Paul frowns, confused but worried about his reputation. "Our employee Rose stole Victoria's diamond ring," Margaret declares, pointing to the socialite who hadn't even noticed it was missing. "I've suspected small thefts for weeks." "That's impossible," Rose protests, appearing horrified at the dining room entrance. "I gave the ring to you myself." "What an outrageous accusation." Margaret feigns indignation. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's all go verify this slander." The humiliating procession goes upstairs. Rose feels her face burning under the judgmental looks of the elite. Margaret opens the drawer with perverse drama, removing the ring as planted evidence. "Oh my God!" Victoria exclaims. "I hadn't even noticed." "I didn't steal it," Rose whispers, tears of humiliation flowing. "Someone put this here." "Of course you'd say that," murmurs a guest. "They always make excuses." Paul observes in silence, torn. Luke's progress was undeniable, but social pressure and evidence paralyze him. His reputation before important investors is at stake. "Rose," he finally says, avoiding her pleading eyes, "take your things and leave my house. Now." "Mr. Mitchell," Rose begs desperately, "my mother is dying. I need this job." "Just go," Paul repeats, his voice breaking internally. From the second-floor window, Luke watches Rose being expelled. For the first time in 2 years, tears roll down his face, and he whispers almost inaudibly, "Rose, don't go away." Rose walks through Queen's streets with a bag of clothes, her only possession. The scorching sun contrasts with the cold in her heart. 3 days have passed since she was expelled from the mansion, and every door that closes is a new blow to her dignity. "We're not hiring," the owner of a mansion on Manhattan's Upper East Side says dryly, looking Rose up and down. "And frankly, after what we heard about you," Margaret was efficient. She spread through the elite's social media groups that Rose was a compulsive thief and unstable. Every wealthy family in New York already knows her reputation. At the community hospital, Rose holds her mother's cold hand, Anna Wilson, 60 years old, who's wasting away in a basic bed. Uncontrolled diabetes is slowly taking her life. "Honey, are you okay?" Anna asks with a weak voice, noticing Rose's red eyes. I'm fine, Mom, just a little tired. Rose forces a smile, hiding her despair. Her mother's medications cost $1,800 a month. Without salary, how will she pay? Mrs. Wilson, the nurse, appears with a paper in hand. This month's bill is overdue. If you don't pay by Friday, we'll have to transfer her to another facility. Rose feels the world collapse. Another hospital means certain death. She considers selling the few pieces of furniture she owns, but it wouldn't even cover a week of treatment. Leaving the hospital, Rose sees a poster. Rome, promotional flights. Maybe it's time to return to Italy, accept complete defeat. At least there she could work as a teacher again, even with her stained reputation. Her phone rings. Unknown number. Rose? Paul's voice is tense, almost desperate. You need to come back. Right now. Mr. Mitchell. Luke. He stopped eating since you left. He won't speak, won't react to anything. The doctors are worried. Paul makes a heavy pause. Please. My son is dying. Rose returns to the Mitchell mansion with her heart divided between hope and fear. Paul receives her in the library, where Luke lies listless in his chair, staring into emptiness like in the worst days after the accident. He hasn't eaten anything solid in 3 days, Paul explains, his voice heavy with guilt. He refuses all medications, pushes away anyone who tries to help him. Doctors are talking about forced hospitalization. Rose approaches the chair and whispers in Italian, Hello, little prince. Luke slowly raises his eyes. For the first time in days, a spark of life appears on his face. He extends a trembling hand toward her. Rose, you came back, he murmurs weakly. Paul watches the miracle happen again, tears springing to his eyes. I was wrong. Please forgive me. Mr. Mitchell, Rose says firmly, if you want me to really help Luke, I need complete freedom to use my methods. No interference. Anything, Paul agrees desperately. I'll offer triple your previous salary. Margaret watches from the door, her face twisted with hatred. She lost the first battle, but the war was far from over. And another condition. Rose continues, looking directly at Margaret. I want to review with Luke's doctor all the medications he takes. I need to understand exactly what he's receiving. That's totally unnecessary, Margaret protests. I've been handling his medication for 2 years. Margaret, Paul interrupts with a steel voice, Rose will have complete authority over my son's treatment. You're gonna cooperate fully. The housekeeper grits her teeth but nods with a forced smile. Inside, she plans to accelerate Rose's destruction. Very well. Rose kneels beside Luke and begins singing softly in Italian. The boy immediately relaxes, his features softening. If I can help Luke, Rose looks directly at Paul, you'll have to listen to me about everything I discover. No questions asked. I accept, Paul agrees, not imagining that this promise would change everything. Rose works discreetly with Luke in the library, away from Margaret's watchful eyes. She uses techniques she developed in Italy, multilingual word games, songs with specific rhythms, synchronized breathing exercises. Breathe with me, Luke, she whispers in Italian. Inhale. Exhale. Very good. Luke follows perfectly, his eyes shining with growing intelligence. In just 2 days, he already forms complex sentences alternating between English and Italian, progress that should take months. Rose, why do I feel better when I don't take medicine in the morning? Luke asks quietly. Rose frowns. An 8-year-old shouldn't make that connection alone. How do you know that, sweetheart? When Margaret forgets to give me medicine early, my head gets clearer, Luke explains, with childish seriousness. Like a fog lifts. Margaret watches from afar, her paranoia growing. She can't hear the conversations, but clearly sees Luke's extraordinary progress. Every word he speaks is a threat to her control. During lunch, Paul joins them, amazed by his son's transformation. "Dad, Rose teaches me to think differently," Luke says excitedly in Italian. "What kind of thinking?" Paul asks, smiling for the first time in years. "When I sing in Italian, I can remember things," Luke explains. "I remember Mom. I remember when I used to talk before." Rose and Paul exchange meaningful glances. The child was describing recovery of traumatic memories through multilingual stimuli. "Mr. Mitchell," Rose says carefully, "I'd really like to talk with Dr. Harrison about Luke's current medication. He shows signs that he might be receiving inappropriate doses." Margaret, who was serving lunch, drops the plate with a crash. "Sorry, how clumsy of me," she murmurs, but her eyes flash with rage. That afternoon, Luke whispers to Rose when they're alone. "Rose, sometimes I pretend to be more confused than I am." "Why?" Rose asks, surprised. "Because when I show I'm getting better, Margaret gets mad and increases the medicine," Luke reveals with frightening innocence. Rose hugs the boy, her heart tightening. The child had developed defense mechanisms against his own housekeeper. In Paul's office, Private Detective James Carter delivers a thick envelope. "Mr. Mitchell, here's everything about Rose Wilson. Get ready because it's surprising." Paul opens the file with nervous hands. Photos show Rose in elegant uniforms, surrounded by happy children at a luxurious school in Rome. Newspaper articles talk about revolutionary method and prodigy teacher. "She's a doctor of educational psychology," James Carter explains, "specialist in child neurological development, fluent in 9 languages, one of Europe's most respected professionals." Paul turns pages, each discovery shocking him more. Why would a doctor-teacher be working as a housekeeper? Here's why. James Carter points to dramatic headlines. "Tragedy in Rome. Student dies during therapy. Teacher leaves Europe after accident." Paul reads the details of Marco's accident, feeling compassion for the pain Rose must have lived through. But the official investigation completely cleared her. "So she wasn't at fault?" Paul asks. "None whatsoever. The accident was ruled a tragic incident, but media pressure destroyed her reputation in Europe. Meanwhile, Rose discreetly examines Luke's medication bottles. Using her medical knowledge, she backs up photos of each medication to the cloud, notes dosages, and researches interactions. Her discoveries are terrifying. Luke was receiving almost adult doses of benzodiazepines, unnecessary sedatives, and a combination that could cause neurological damage. "Oh my God," Rose whispers, comparing with old medical prescriptions she finds. "Dr. Harrison prescribed only mild anti-anxiety medication. Where did all these others come from?" In the office, Paul continues absorbing the information. "So Rose is exactly who Luke needs." "Apparently yes, but sir," James Carter hesitates, "I also investigated Luke's medication as you asked. Dr. Harrison's been trying to reach you urgently." Paul picks up the phone immediately. Dr. Harrison answers on the first ring. "Mr. Mitchell, finally, I discovered something very serious. Someone's been altering my prescriptions for 2 years. Luke should be taking 1/10 of his current medications." Paul feels his blood freeze. "What do you mean?" "The prescriptions I get back have completely different dosages from what I prescribe. Luke's being systematically overdosed." Paul hangs up, his mind racing. Rose hides qualifications that can save Luke. Margaret might be poisoning his son, but he promised Rose total authority. At that moment, screams come from the library. Margaret waits for Rose in the back hallway, having heard Paul talking to the doctor. Her mask of polite housekeeper has completely fallen, revealing pure desperation. "Pretty clever, aren't you, little doctor?" Margaret spits the words with venom. "Thought you could fool me forever," Rose freezes. "What are you talking about?" I've known exactly who you are for months, Rose Wilson. Famous teacher, revolutionary method, and responsible for Marco Williams's death. Margaret smiles with malice. I researched everything when you started threatening my position. Rose's blood runs cold. How did you? You think I'd allow a stranger near this family without investigating? Margaret circles Rose like a predator. Imagine when Paul discovers he handed his son over to a killer. Marco died in an accident, Rose protests. The investigation cleared me. The official investigation, yes. But the Italian press didn't think so. Margaret laughs cruelly. I saw all the headlines. Experimental method questioned. Tragedy during therapy. Families pulled their children from school. Rose leans against the wall, reliving the nightmare. The unfair accusations, the public shaming, the guilt she carries even knowing she had no real fault. What do you want? Rose asks with a broken voice. Simple. You're going to leave this house voluntarily. Tonight. Margaret approaches threateningly. Or tomorrow, Paul gets a complete file about your past. Headlines, accident photos, dramatic testimonies. Luke needs me, Rose whispers desperately. Luke was perfectly fine with me for 2 years. Margaret lies shamelessly. You're filling his head with dangerous techniques that already killed one child. The words hit Rose like daggers. Her greatest fear was always causing harm to another child. And don't think about telling Paul about the medications, Margaret whispers with venomous satisfaction. He'll never believe a compulsive liar against me who's taken care of this family for 15 years. Margaret moves closer. You have until midnight. Leave quietly or be exposed as a killer. And this time, I guarantee your mother in the hospital has medical complications. The final threat leaves Rose frozen. Margaret didn't just control the mansion, she had connections throughout the city. Forgive me, Marco, Rose sobs when Margaret walks away. Maybe I really am cursed to hurt children. At 5 in the afternoon, Margaret prepares special coffee for Rose. With expert hands of someone who's done this before, she crushes 2 Klonopin pills and mixes them in the sugar, creating a dose that will cause mental confusion without being lethal. Rose, dear, Margaret calls sweetly, I made some strong coffee for you. You must be exhausted from all this work. Rose, still shaken by the blackmail, accepts the cup without suspecting. The coffee has a slightly bitter taste, but she attributes it to stress. 20 minutes later, during the therapy session with Luke, Rose begins feeling strange. Her words become slurred, her movements uncoordinated. Rose, are you okay? Luke asks, worried, noticing the change. I'm fine, sweetheart, Rose responds, but her tongue feels heavy. She tries to get up to grab a book and stumbles, almost falling over the wheelchair. At that exact moment, Paul enters the library, still processing the revelations about Rose's qualifications and the conversation with Dr. Harrison. He sees Rose staggering, eyes glazed, almost colliding with his son. Rose, what's happening? Paul shouts, running to protect Luke. I don't know, Rose stammers, trying to lean on the table. I feel dizzy. Margaret appears at the door, as if by coincidence. Oh my God, she's having some kind of breakdown. Dad, something's not right, Luke says nervously in Italian. Paul holds Rose by the shoulders, torn between his new understanding of her qualifications and the evidence before his eyes. Did you take something? Are you sick? No, I would never. Rose tries to protest, but her words come out confused. Mr. Mitchell, Margaret intervenes with false concern. People with traumatic pasts sometimes have episodes. Maybe the pressure of hiding her true identity. Paul freezes. Margaret knows about Rose's past. You're putting my son in danger. Paul explodes, his confusion turning to anger. Get out of here. Rose tries to explain about the medication discoveries, but the sedative makes her incoherent. Paul helps her leave the library, conflicted between protecting his son and his growing suspicions about Margaret. "Luke, are you okay?" Paul asks his son. "Yes, Dad. But Rose..." Luke looks out the window, seeing Rose stumble in the garden. In the hallway, Rose leans against the wall, fighting the chemical fog. A terrible certainty forms. Someone drugged her, and she knows who. Even drugged, Rose forces her mind to function. She needs evidence before Margaret destroys her. With uncoordinated but determined movements, she heads to Margaret's office on the second floor. The door is slightly open. Margaret, overconfident, didn't bother to lock it. Rose enters silently. The office is a shrine to obsessive control. Organized files, family photos at every stage, and a computer still on that catches her attention. Rose accesses the computer, drawing on her training in educational technology. In the personal documents folder, she finds a dark treasure, forged resignation letters from former employees, all young women. Original medical prescriptions from Dr. Harrison, digitally altered to much higher doses. "My God," Rose whispers, uploading everything to her cloud account. She was systematically poisoning Luke. More files reveal the complete scheme. Margaret intercepted medical emails, forged reports saying Luke was getting worse, and maintained a private pharmacy of unauthorized medications. Rose finds more shocking documents, secret bank accounts where Margaret embezzled house money, records of lost jewelry she sold, and detailed plans to get rid of any woman who threatened her position. "She's a monster," Rose murmurs, saving every file to the cloud. Most disturbing, a file called Control contains secretly recorded audios. Margaret recorded Paul's conversations, blackmailed other employees, and kept files on every person who worked in the house. Rose even finds deleted emails where Margaret threatened doctors who questioned Luke's dosages. Dr. Harrison had tried to reduce medication several times, but received anonymous threats. Footsteps echo in the hallway. Margaret's coming upstairs. Rose quickly sends the last file and closes the computer. When Margaret opens the door, Rose is pretending to have stumbled near the desk. "What are you doing here?" Margaret shouts suspiciously. I got lost," Rose stammers, still under the drug's effect. "I was looking for the bathroom." Margaret observes the computer, but it's closed normally. "Get out of here, now!" Rose leaves stumbling, but inside her pocket, her phone vibrates silently, confirmation that all files were saved to the cloud. Margaret doesn't notice, but she just lost the war. Rose now had irrefutable evidence of years of crimes. "Tomorrow," Rose whispers to herself, "the truth's gonna come out." Margaret finds Rose in the kitchen the next morning, still unsteady, but more lucid. The housekeeper decides to accelerate her destructive plans. "Hope you slept well," Margaret says with false sweetness, "because today's gonna be your last day here." Rose turns, determination growing despite her fear. "Luke knows the truth about you." "Luke's a confused child who spent 2 years taking medications for mental stability," Margaret replies coldly. "Nobody's gonna believe a word from him." Margaret approaches threateningly. "You know what's going to happen tonight, during the charity gala, in front of 300 people from New York's elite. I'm going to expose you as a child killer. The evidence I found will prove." "What evidence?" Margaret smiles maliciously. "You broke into my office while drugged yesterday. Anything you claim will be discredited as hallucination or revenge." Rose realizes the perfect trap. Even with real evidence, it'll seem like revenge from a fired employee. "I have lawyers, media contacts, 15 years of impeccable reputation," Margaret continues, savoring each word. "You're a lying housekeeper with a criminal past in Europe." "You poisoned Luke for 2 years," Rose whispers with growing indignation. "I took care of Luke," Margaret explodes, showing her instability. I kept this family together. Paul needs me. Luke needs me. Margaret grabs Rose's arm forcefully. Tonight, during the party, your life ends. Forever. And if you try to hurt me, I guarantee your mother in the hospital will have fatal complications. You can't? I can and I will, Margaret hisses. I have contacts in every hospital in the city. A medication error, a wrong dose. Accidents happen. From the hallway, a small but firm voice says in clear English, I heard everything. Luke is at the kitchen entrance, his eyes shining not with childish innocence, but with brave determination. Luke, Margaret forces a sweet smile. Go back to your room, sweetie. No, Luke responds simply. I heard you threaten Rose and her mother. I heard you confess that you gave me medicine I didn't need. Margaret goes pale. The boy she controlled for 2 years was finally rebelling. Rose, Luke says in Italian, tonight we'll show everyone the truth. The game had completely changed. Luke waits for Margaret to leave for her afternoon shopping before looking for Rose in the garden. She's sitting on a bench, mentally organizing her plan for the night. Rose, he says in Italian, approaching with his wheelchair. I can help. Rose looks up. Sweetheart, this is too dangerous for you. Not more dangerous than letting Margaret continue, Luke responds with impressive maturity. She hurt me for 2 years, hurt you. She's going to hurt other people. Rose kneels beside the wheelchair. What do you have in mind? I know where she keeps important documents, Luke reveals. In the secret drawer of her office, I saw her opening it several times when she thought I was sleeping. Luke, I don't want you to... Rose, he interrupts, taking her hand. You taught me to be brave again. You taught me I can fight when something's wrong. Rose feels tears welling up. This boy who suffered so much trauma and forced medication was choosing to fight for justice. Are you sure? Rose asks. Absolutely sure, Luke responds in firm English. Margaret's going to try to destroy you tonight, but if we have physical proof too... I already have digital evidence, Rose reveals. I managed to back up files from her computer yesterday. Then we need the physical documents too, Luke reasons. So nobody can say you made everything up. Rose hugs the boy, admiring his courage. You don't need to do anything risky. Just tell me where the documents are. No, Luke says firmly. I'm going with you. It's time for Margaret to pay for what she did to me and to my mom, Rose frowns. Your mom? Margaret always said Mom died because I distracted her in the car, Luke reveals sadly. But yesterday, when you sang, I remembered the truth. Margaret was arguing with Mom. She caused the accident. Rose is shocked. Margaret not only poisoned Luke, she may have caused his mother's death. Tonight, Luke whispers with determination, we're going to get justice for everyone. The moon rises, illuminating 2 unlikely warriors, a traumatized teacher and a brave child, united against an enemy who underestimated both. Tomorrow night, Rose whispers. Finally, the truth. The Mitchell mansion buzzes with elegant activity. Staff organize expensive flower arrangements, test sound equipment, and prepare the main hall for 300 VIP guests. Paul's annual charity gala is the most anticipated event among New York's elite. Paul discreetly calls Dr. Harrison. Doctor, I need you to come to the party tonight. Bring all documents about Luke's original prescriptions. It's time to expose the truth. Rose works discreetly, serving appetizers and watching Margaret's every move. The housekeeper coordinates everything with military efficiency, but Rose notices signs of nervousness, slightly trembling hands, obsessive checks of the microphone and screen. Tonight will be perfect, Margaret murmurs to herself, testing the sound system. Absolutely perfect. D. In Luke's room, Rose and the boy review their final plan. Rose organizes the evidence on a flash drive, simplifying everything for quick presentation. "Are you sure about the documents in the drawer?" Rose asks in Italian. "Yes, Rose," Luke responds simply. "She always hides important papers there." Rose checks the flash drive. Altered prescriptions, photos of fraudulent bank accounts, audio recordings of threats, evidence that would destroy Margaret. "What if she tries to stop us?" Luke asks with childish concern. "Then your dad will help us," Rose smiles. "He already knows about the wrong medicine you were taking." In the kitchen, Margaret finishes a call. "Yes, I want 3 journalists here at 8 o'clock. I have a story about a child killer." At 7 in the evening, the first guests arrive. Dr. Harrison enters discreetly through the back, bringing a folder with original medical documents. Paul receives him privately. "Doctor, thank you for coming. Tonight we're going to expose what Margaret did to my son. I'm prepared, Mr. Mitchell. I have all the real prescriptions I made for Luke." Margaret circulates through the hall, receiving guests with fake smiles, savoring in advance her revenge against Rose. In the library, Rose whispers to Luke, "Ready, sweetheart?" "Ready, Rose," Luke responds with simple courage. "Let's tell the truth." Sound technician Carlos approaches Rose discreetly. Paul had instructed him to help her when necessary. "Mrs. Rose," Carlos whispers, "when you need the system, give me a signal." Rose nods gratefully. Everything was prepared for the final revelation. The main hall had never looked so elegant. 300 guests in formal wear chat about business while tasting French champagne. New York's elite at their best behavior. Margaret circulates like a queen, wearing her best navy blue dress with pearls. She smiles radiantly, preparing for the destructive spectacle. Mrs. Stevens, a journalist from New York Magazine, approaches. "What explosive story do you have for us?" "In a few minutes," Margaret whispers with sadistic pleasure, "you'll have the headline of the year." Paul goes up on stage, taking the microphone for his traditional speech. The audience respectfully silences, champagne glasses in hand. "Friends, thank you for being here," Paul begins, looking for Rose at the back of the hall. "This year our gala has very special meaning." "Mr. Mitchell," Margaret interrupts, climbing onto the stage with determination. "Before continuing, I need to make an urgent security announcement." The audience murmurs curiously. Paul feigns surprise, but was already expecting this moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," Margaret announces dramatically, "I'm sorry to say we have a dangerous person among us. A woman hiding a dark past." Rose takes a deep breath at the back of the hall. Beside her, Luke is strategically positioned near the sound table, where Carlos awaits instructions. "This woman is responsible for the death of an autistic child in Italy," Margaret declares, pointing at Rose. "She used experimental methods that caused the death of Marco Williams, 8 years old. The audience reacts with controlled shock, elegant murmurs, not hysterical screams. New York's elite maintains composure even when facing scandals. Rose Wilson worked here as a housekeeper, lying about her identity, hiding her criminal past." Margaret continues her performance. Some guests whisper among themselves, others observe Rose with curiosity. The reaction is more cautious than hysterical. Paul remains on stage, apparently shocked but ready for his part in the plan. "This woman," Margaret points dramatically, "put our dear Luke in danger using the same methods that killed a child in Europe." Dr. Harrison, strategically positioned in the hall, watches everything with professional attention. Margaret smiles triumphantly, but Luke gives a discreet signal to Carlos at the sound table. It was time for the truth. Margaret orders them to project on the screen the Italian headlines she collected. "Tragedy in Rome, accident during therapy, teacher leaves Europe." The images are impactful against Rose. "Look who we trusted our children with," Margaret declares theatrically. A woman who caused a child's death with dangerous methods. Rose remains calm in the center of the hall. The elite's gazes are of curiosity mixed with judgment, but not total hysteria. She lied about everything. Margaret displays documents. She hid her identity, infiltrated our house, put Luke at risk. The audience reacts with elegant murmurs. Socialites whisper discreetly. Businessmen frown. Journalists note everything. How did she pass the security check? A voice questions politely. What kind of methods did she use? Another asks with controlled concern. Paul observes from the stage, playing his role as a surprised father, but internally prepared to reverse the situation. Mr. Mitchell, Margaret turns with fake tears. Forgive me for exposing this publicly, but I couldn't allow her to continue threatening Luke. Rose maintains dignity, allowing Margaret to reach the peak of her performance. Every lie is being documented by the journalists present. This woman is a predator, Margaret points dramatically. She studied our family, discovered Luke's trauma, used it to infiltrate. The elite is convinced, but in a reserved way. There are no screams or loss of control, just polite disapproval and worried whispers. Margaret feels victory approaching when a clear voice echoes through the hall. Margaret is lying. Everyone turns. Luke appears at the entrance in his wheelchair, wearing a small suit like a gentleman. For the first time in 2 years, he's before a crowd. Luke! Paul runs to protect his son. You shouldn't be here. Yes, Dad, Luke says simply. I should be. Margaret isn't telling the truth. The hall silences. An 8-year-old child, trauma victim, is confronting a respected housekeeper. Margaret forces a maternal smile. Dear Luke, you're confused. I'm not confused, Luke responds with simple firmness that impresses everyone. I want to tell what really happened. Luke positions his wheelchair in the center of the hall. Paul offers him the microphone, and his childish but clear voice echoes to 300 people. My name is Luke Mitchell, he begins seriously. I stopped talking when my mother died, but not because I was very sad, because Margaret said it was my fault. The audience murmurs, intrigued by this new version. Margaret gave me lots of medicine every day, Luke continues with simple but impactful vocabulary. She said they were to help me, but they made me very tired and confused. Dr. Harrison discreetly approaches the stage, prepared to confirm everything. When Rose came and sang to me, for the first time I could think clearly, Luke explains. She didn't hurt me. She helped me. Margaret tries to interrupt. Luke, dear. Margaret talked to me when Dad wasn't around, Luke interrupts with courage. She said if I told about the extra medicine, she would hurt other people. The hall is in respectful silence. This clearly traumatized child is making serious accusations. She gave me medicine the doctor didn't order. Luke reveals simply, I knew because I learned to read the names on the little bottles. Dr. Harrison goes up on stage. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Luke's neurologist. I confirm he was receiving medications completely inappropriate for a child. This is ridiculous, Margaret protests, but her voice trembles. This boy has problems. He's making things up. I'm not making things up, Luke says calmly, taking a small recorder from his pocket. I recorded when you talked to me. Margaret goes pale. How did you... Luke presses play. Margaret's clear voice echoes through the hall. If you tell your father about the medicine, I'll hurt Rose and her mother. You want that? The audience reacts with controlled but real shock. The evidence is irrefutable. Rose helped me remember things, Luke continues bravely, like the day my mother died. Luke, don't... Margaret tries to approach, but Paul blocks her firmly. Margaret was fighting with my mother in the car, Luke reveals with a small but firm voice. Shouting about money. My mother got nervous and crashed the car. The silence in the hall is total. 300 elite people just heard a devastating confession. Rose taught me the accident wasn't my fault, Luke concludes. It was Margaret's. All eyes turn to the housekeeper, who is now cornered in her own trap. The brave child had changed everything. Rose walks calmly to the stage. Carlos, the sound technician, helps her connect her flash drive to the system. Her voice echoes clearly through the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen," Rose begins professionally, "Margaret is right about one thing. I lied about my identity." The audience waits, now more open after Luke's testimony. "I'm Rose Wilson, Doctor of Educational Psychology, specialist in child neurological development. I worked at St. Joseph Institute in Rome." Paul feigns convincing surprise, but internally smiles. The truth was finally coming out. "Marco Williams died in a tragic accident," Rose continues with a firm voice. "The official investigation completely cleared me, but the pain of loss brought me to America." Carlos activates the projection system. On screen appear organized and clear documents, original medical prescriptions from Dr. Harrison compared with altered versions. "Margaret modified medical prescriptions for 2 years, Rose announces calmly. "Luke should have taken mild anti-anxiety medication. She was drugging him with adult doses of sedatives." Several doctors in the audience immediately recognize the severity, murmuring worriedly among themselves. Dr. Harrison goes up on stage with a folder of documents. "I confirm that all prescriptions shown are forgeries of my original recipes." The next projection shows emails. Margaret threatening Dr. Harrison, blackmailing other doctors, buying medications without prescription. She threatened any professional who tried to help Luke, Rose reveals. More evidence appears methodically. Suspicious bank transfers, online sales of lost jewelry, documented embezzlement. 15 years exploiting this family, Rose declares. Margaret Stevens turned this house into a center of blackmail and abuse. "Lies!" Margaret screams desperately. "She made everything up." "How can I invent your own files?" Rose asks calmly, showing the last evidence, audios secretly recorded by Margaret of private conversations. The audience is shocked in a controlled but deep way. The respected housekeeper was being exposed as a systematic criminal. Paul takes the microphone, playing convincing paternal indignation. "Margaret Stevens, you poisoned my son. You're fired and will be arrested." Security approaches Margaret, who is isolated in the center of the hall that once applauded her. New York's elite had witnessed the spectacular fall of a woman they had trusted for years. Margaret, surrounded by security and accusing stares, has a partial mental breakdown. Years of lies crumble, but she still tries to defend herself. "You don't understand," she screams, losing composure. "I took care of this family. I kept everything working." Paul approaches, controlling his rage. "Took care? You poisoned my son for 2 years." "Luke was difficult," Margaret explodes, revealing instability. "After Maria Elena died, he cried constantly, asked questions. He needed discipline." "Discipline?" Dr. Harrison intervenes, horrified. "You drugged a traumatized child." "He got better," Margaret insists desperately. "Quiet, no problems. Rose ruined everything." Rose approaches courageously. "Why do this to an innocent child?" Margaret laughs bitterly. "You think Paul would notice me if Luke were normal and independent?" The confession shocks everyone. Margaret deliberately kept Luke sick to remain necessary. Maria Elena started suspecting. Margaret partially admits. She asked questions about expenses, about some pieces that disappeared. "That's why you caused the accident?" Paul asks tensely. "I didn't cause anything," Margaret denies, but then slips. "I was just explaining that discovering certain things would be bad for everyone." She got upset. It's not a complete confession, but enough to implicate her in Maria Elena's death. "And then," Luke says with a small voice, "you said it was my fault." "Because it was simpler," Margaret responds without thinking, then realizes her mistake. The audience is in shocked silence. Margaret just partially incriminated herself. 15 years I dedicated, Margaret continues, losing control. And you were going to replace me with a stranger. You were a parasite, Paul says with controlled disgust, destroying my family from within. Margaret tries a final card. Without me, Luke will regress. You'll be lost. Never again, Rose says firmly, will you touch this child. Security handcuffs Margaret while she murmurs incoherent threats. Her partial confession was heard by 300 important witnesses. There was no escape. With Margaret being escorted away, Rose can finally tell her complete story. Paul offers her the microphone with renewed respect. Now that the truth about Margaret has been revealed, Rose begins, I owe you my real story. The hall is respectfully attentive. After witnessing such drama, everyone wants to understand this extraordinary woman. I'm the daughter of Italian immigrants in Queens. My grandmother raised me bilingual and encouraged me to study. I got a scholarship to Europe, where I specialized in special children. Rose looks at Paul with total honesty. I developed multilingual therapy methods that helped hundreds of children. Marco was my greatest success, an autistic boy who flourished under my guidance. She takes a deep breath, controlling emotion. On the day of his death, Marco ran away during a storm to save a cat. I ran after him, almost reached him, but he was hit by a truck. The investigation cleared me, but guilt destroyed me. Some guests are visibly moved by Rose's honesty. I returned to America financially and emotionally broken. Working as a housekeeper was my self-imposed penance, a way to punish myself by hiding my talents. Paul approaches, his genuine guilt showing. Rose, why didn't you tell from the beginning? Because I was afraid of failing with another child, Rose admits. When I saw Luke quiet in the library, I saw Marco again. I couldn't resist trying to help. Dr. Harrison confirms Rose's methods saved Luke. Without her intervention, neurological damage could have been permanent. Rose taught me to be strong, Luke says simply. She never hurt me. She helped me remember I'm smart. Paul kneels before Rose, real humility. Forgive me. I doubted when I should have trusted. You saved my son. Paul, Rose uses his name for the first time. You were protecting Luke. Any father would do the same. Rose gently touches his face. You had no way of knowing. The hall erupts in sincere applause. The transformation is complete. Rose went from accused to heroine through truth. Rose, Luke asks hopefully, will you stay with us? Rose looks at Paul, who whispers, please, not as an employee, as family. Rose's smile illuminates the entire hall. Yes, sweetheart, forever. Justice had triumphed, and a new family was being born. 6 months later, Margaret Stevens is in a cell awaiting trial. The charges are serious: poisoning a minor, fraud, threats, and participation in Maria Elena's death. Her arrest became a national case. Other elite families began investigating former employees fired by Margaret, discovering a pattern of destruction that lasted years. At the Mitchell mansion, life has completely changed. Luke, free from unnecessary medications, shows natural intelligence. He studies piano, speaks 3 languages, and helps Rose with a special project. Rose, Paul finds her in the library, organizing teaching materials. The lawyers brought news. Rose stops organizing and turns. Paul holds official documents. Margaret goes to trial in 3 months. The prosecutor's office is working with 15 to 20 years in prison for proven crimes. And the other families? Rose asks worriedly. 12 former employees have already given testimony. Margaret's pattern affected many people. Paul sits beside Rose. She won't hurt anyone else, Doctor. Harrison enters with a satisfied smile. Luke is officially recovered. Tests show 0 neurological damage, complete medical success. It wasn't just medicine, Rose smiles humbly. It was love, patience, and science applied correctly. Luke appears excited. Rose, I finished my essay about our adventure. Rose takes the notebook. How Rose Saved Our Family, by Luke Mitchell. Rose isn't a common teacher. She's an angel in disguise who came to save us. Paul feels genuine emotion. Perfect, son. Rose, Luke continues enthusiastically, Dad has a surprise for you. Paul stands up, slightly nervous. Rose, you completely transformed our lives. Luke has a family again. I rediscovered hope. Rose smiles encouragingly, noticing his nervousness. I want to offer more than a partnership in the Institute. Paul continues, taking a deep breath. I want to offer my heart, if you'll accept forming a family with us. Rose looks at Luke, who nods enthusiastically, then at Paul, whose eyes shine with genuine love. Yes, she whispers emotionally, I accept everything. Hugs, tears of joy, laughter. The family was finally complete. Outside, New York's sun shines over a new chance at happiness, built on truth, justice, and unconditional love. Love had defeated evil forever. The hall of the Mitchell mansion still echoes with applause from 300 guests. Paul, still on stage, takes the microphone with hands trembling from emotion and nervousness. Ladies and gentlemen, he begins, his voice gaining strength. Before we end this extraordinary night, I need to do something I should have done long ago. The audience, still processing the dramatic events, respectfully silences. Rose looks surprised from the center of the hall. Rose Wilson, Paul calls her, extending his hand. Please, come here. Rose hesitates, but Luke encourages her. Go, Rose. Dad has something important to say. She walks to the stage under the curious gazes of New York's elite. Paul helps her up, holding her hands tenderly. This extraordinary woman, Paul says into the microphone, but looking directly at Rose, didn't just save my son. She saved our entire family. She taught me that true value isn't in titles or money, but in the ability to love unconditionally. Rose feels tears welling up. The sincerity in Paul's voice is undeniable. Rose, you came to our house as a housekeeper, but you were an angel in disguise. You brought back my son's voice, the light in his eyes, and filled our home with hope again. Paul kneels on stage before everyone. The audience whispers emotionally at the gesture. I love you, Rose, not for what you did for Luke, but for who you are, your kindness, your courage, your ability to forgive even when I was unfair. Paul takes a ring from his pocket. Will you marry me? Will you officially be part of our family? The hall is in absolute silence. Rose looks at Paul kneeling, then at Luke, who waves enthusiastically from the side of the stage. Paul, she whispers, but the microphone amplifies her voice. How can I trust again? How do I know you won't doubt me again when difficulties arise? The honest question echoes through the hall, showing Rose's vulnerability after everything she went through. Paul remains kneeling, his eyes shining with sincere tears. Rose, you have every right to doubt. I failed you when you needed support the most. He stands up, still holding the ring, and looks directly into her eyes. But I promise I'll spend the rest of my life proving I deserve your trust, not just as a husband, but as a true partner in everything. Rose feels her heart racing. Paul's honesty is palpable, but the fear of being hurt again makes her hesitate. Dad really loves you. Luke approaches with his wheelchair, speaking into the microphone with childish seriousness. He cried a lot when you left, and he apologized to me for not believing in you. Paul confirms emotionally, Luke's right. I realized that without you, our house went back to being just an empty mansion. You transformed it into a home. Rose looks around the hall. 300 people await her answer, but she focuses only on the two men before her. Rose, Paul continues. I'm not just offering marriage. I'm offering true partnership. We'll create together a project to help special children. Your knowledge, my resources, and Luke's love as inspiration. Dr. Harrison approaches the stage. Rose, as a doctor I can say, what you have is rare, love based on mutual respect and common goals. Rose takes a deep breath, looking at the simple but elegant ring. Paul, I accept marrying you. Not for security, not out of gratitude, but because I saw your true heart today. She extends her hand, and he places the ring with reverent care. And I accept being your partner in everything, in the project we're going to create, in raising Luke, in building a family based on love and honesty. Luke shouts in Italian, "Hooray! Rose will be my mum!" The hall explodes in sincere applause. New York's elite just witnessed not only the exposure of a criminal, but the birth of a genuine family. When will we get married? Paul asks, smiling. When you and Luke think it's the right time, Rose responds, hugging the boy. Soon! Luke laughs, making everyone laugh too. The healing was complete. 4 months later, in a simple house in the Bronx, Margaret Stevens wears a blue cleaning uniform. At 54, she discovered what it's like to live on the other side of the employer-employee relationship. Margaret, the homeowner calls harshly. Don't forget to wash well behind the refrigerator and be careful with my things. Yes, ma'am, Margaret responds, swallowing her pride. Ironically, she now understands what Rose felt when being humiliated. On the crowded bus going to work, she sees headlines in newspapers. Criminal housekeeper awaits trial and Mitchell family builds institute for children. A photo shows Rose, Paul and Luke visiting special children. Rose is radiant, Paul proud, Luke smiling, the family Margaret tried to destroy now flourishing. How awful what she did to that child, comments a passenger. How can someone poison a kid? Margaret lowers her head, pretending not to hear. Every glance of recognition on the street is a reminder of her fall. At work, her employer treats her with professional coldness. There's no excessive cruelty, just the reality of being a common employee without privileges or power. Margaret, today you clean the bathrooms, and remember, don't use the guest bathroom. The words echo cruelly. She used to say that to Rose. At night in her small but clean room, Margaret counts the money earned. Enough to live with dignity, but without the luxuries she stole for years. Through the small television, she sees an interview with Paul. Rose is helping plan a support center for special children. Her multilingual teaching method is showing extraordinary results. Margaret turns off the TV, feeling the weight of irony. The woman she tried to destroy is building a legacy of hope. There's no excessive hatred in her punishment, just the reality of living honestly for the first time in decades. The real punishment isn't humiliation, but the awareness of the good she could have done if she had chosen love instead of control. On Monday, she'll face a trial that will define years in prison. But her real prison has already begun, living knowing she wasted 15 years hurting innocent people. The fall was just and necessary. 8 months after the party that changed everything, the chapel of the Mitchell mansion is decorated with simple but elegant flowers. Rose chose daisies and white roses, symbols of purity and new beginnings. Only 40 intimate guests are present. Dr. Harrison, loyal employees, some of Paul's colleagues, and Anna Wilson, Rose's mother, finally recovered from diabetes and radiant with happiness. My daughter looks beautiful, Anna whispers in Italian, adjusting Rose's simple veil. Your grandmother would be so proud. Rose wears a discreet white dress without exaggerations. Her beauty comes from the genuine happiness she radiates. Thank you for being here, Mum. I know it wasn't easy to accept all the changes. This man truly loves you, Anna smiles. And Luke, he's the grandson I always dreamed of having. At the chapel door, Luke waits proudly in his small tuxedo, holding the rings on a velvet cushion. He insisted on being the ring-bearer, a role he considers a special honor. "Rose," he whispers when she approaches, "you're beautiful as an angel." "Thank you, my little boy," Rose responds, kissing his forehead lovingly. Paul is at the altar wearing a simple suit, his eyes shining when he sees Rose walking toward him. There's no excessive pomp, just genuine love being celebrated. The priest, a family friend for decades, conducts the ceremony with touching simplicity. "Paul and Rose, you found each other through difficult circumstances, but built love based on truth and mutual respect." During the vows, Paul declares, "Rose, I promise never to doubt you again. I promise to be a true partner, not just a husband. Our house will always be a place of love and honesty." Rose responds with an emotional voice. "Paul, I promise to love you and Luke unconditionally. I promise to transform our house into a home full of laughter, music, and hope." When they exchange rings, Luke exclaims naturally, "Now we're a real family." The chapel laughs emotionally. Dr. Harrison discreetly wipes away tears. "I declare you husband and wife," the priest announces. "You may kiss the bride." The kiss is gentle, respectful, full of future promises. Luke applauds enthusiastically. "Long live Mom Rose!" The guests applaud warmly. Photographs capture the perfect moment. "Where are we going for the honeymoon?" Paul asks. "Rome," Rose smiles. "I want to show Luke where I worked and visit Marco's grave with our new family." 18 months after the wedding, Rose is visibly pregnant at 4 months, while coordinating renovation work on a large house in Brooklyn Heights. The future Mitchell Wilson Center is taking shape. "Rose, you shouldn't be carrying those boxes," Paul lovingly scolds her, taking teaching materials from her hands. "I'm pregnant, not sick," she laughs, but accepts the help. "I want everything ready to receive our first children." Luke, now 10 years old, helps organizing children's books in multiple languages. "Rose, when our little sister is born, will she come work here too?" "When she grows up and wants to help," Rose smiles, touching her belly. "But first she needs to learn to walk." The center started modestly, a renovated house to serve 20 special children initially. Rose will apply her multilingual methods, but with realistic expectations. Dr. Harrison confirmed participation as a volunteer consultant, Paul informs, checking the volunteer list. "And we got city approval for operation." "How many children on the waiting list?" Rose asks. 15 interested families. We'll start slowly, as planned." Rose observes the main room being painted with cheerful colors. Marco would be happy knowing his example is inspiring this. "I'm sure he would." Paul hugs her from behind, protecting mother and baby. Dr. Harrison arrives for final inspection. "Rose, the therapy equipment arrived. Nothing too sophisticated, but adequate to start." "Perfect. We don't need expensive technology. We need love and patience." Luke runs excitedly. "Rose, the first class arrives next week." "Ready, sweetheart?" Rose asks. "Super ready. I'm gonna teach Italian to everyone." Rose hugs Luke, feeling the baby kick in her belly. I think she's excited too. Paul watches his wife and son organizing their dream, his heart overflowing with gratitude. The center is small, but it's a real beginning of something special. "It's gonna work," he whispers. "It will," Rose confirms, looking around. Love always works. It wasn't an educational empire yet, but it was concrete hope for families in need. And that was enough to start. 3 years after the wedding, Rose walks through the Mitchell Wilson Center, holding Elena, her 8-month-old daughter, while watching Luke, now 12, helping a 6-year-old autistic child form his first words in English. "Very good, Peter," Luke encourages patiently. Now try saying thank you in Italian. Grazie. Grazie, Peter babbles, and Luke celebrates as if it were the greatest achievement in the world. The centre grew organically, now serves 50 children in 2 neighbouring houses, but maintains the familiar and welcoming atmosphere Rose always dreamed of. How are the first-year results? Paul asks, arriving with a medical report. Dr. Harrison documented progress in 80% of the children, Rose responds proudly, gently rocking Eleanor. They're not miracles, but they're real and sustainable progress, and the university's interested in the method. Columbia wants to do an official study, Rose smiles, and we received an invitation to present results at a pediatrics conference. Elena babbles something that sounds like mama in Italian, making Rose laugh. I think she's already learning. Luke approaches excitedly. Rose, Peter managed to sing Ninna Nanna completely. Wanna hear? Of course, sweetheart. They head to the music room, where Peter shyly sings the same song that transformed Luke's life years ago. Rose feels tears of emotion. Marco would be proud, she whispers to Paul. He is, Paul responds, kissing her forehead. That afternoon, the family visits the cemetery where Rose placed a simple plaque. Marco Williams, your memory inspires the Mitchell-Wilson Center. Marco, Rose speaks in Italian, this is Elena, and Luke has grown so much. The center helps so many children now. Luke places a new drawing, children of various nationalities playing together. He'd like to know you don't have nightmares anymore, Rose. I really don't, Rose confirms, realizing it's true. Only good dreams now. Returning home, Elena sleeps in Rose's arms while Luke practices piano. Paul works on careful expansion proposals, maybe a second center in Boston in 2 years. We're happy, Rose states, looking out the window at the garden where it all began. Very happy, Paul agrees, hugging his family. Luke stops playing piano and joins the hug. And Eleanor's gonna grow up in a real family. Rose looks at New York's starry sky. From traumatized housekeeper to beloved wife, dedicated mother, and respected educator. The suffering had purpose, not just saving Luke, but creating a circle of love that expands gently. Love always wins, she whispers, as she used to years ago. But now she truly believes it. Did you like this story? Tell me in the comments. What would you do with Margaret? Until the next story.